Everyone is avoiding that area near you, Richard.
Welcome everyone. Today we have Aurelien doing Browback on continuous improvement beyond retro. So for our Browback, we are going to try to do some experiments. Next time we're going to try to do live streaming with our Browback for people working from home, and then we will prepare some extra prize that will be given out by the speaker from like speaker prize. Yeah. So yeah, you will see when we give it out. Yeah, let's get started.
Thank you, Richard. Yeah, thank you. So today I want to talk to you about continuous improvement, or actually more precisely about Kaizen. Kaizen is this philosophy, this concept that comes from Toyota, which basically say that good enough doesn't exist. You all can always improve. There's no physical limit to improving. We can always get better at what we are doing. There's another more subtle concept hidden in the very way the word Kaizen is built in Japanese. Kaizen translates roughly to change for good. So there is this concept that to improve, to get better, you first need to change something. That seems to really contradict our very own nature. We are creatures of habits, and we like to do things the way we've done them before. Have you ever heard that sentence before? We've always done it that way? Yes? Have you said it before? Show of hand? Yeah, half honest crowd.
Maybe a different sentence.
But similar. Yeah. Similar. So to try to break those habits and to introduce that change, we used very often a tool called retrospective that has been popularized by Norm Kerf. This retrospective is really this time where we are stepping back. We have this self-reflection. We're trying to find something we can change so that we can improve. So that sounds all good. In my career, however, I often see retrospective becoming something like that. Have you been in one of those before? Yes? All of you? Cool.
I've seen the last slide.
Yeah, it's not me, actually. Yeah. It's a person who might work at MYOB and he might work in another location and he might be older than me. But that's all. He might be a he. Yeah. So as an agile coach, I spend a lot of my time trying to work on that, making sure that this does not happen, trying to improve retrospective, doing things about them so that this is not the reality. To the point that one moment I started to think, well, maybe I'm doing it the wrong way. Maybe the problem is actually in the tool itself. Maybe retrospective is not the correct tool to bring continuous improvement. To which I quickly concluded that that can't be true because I've always done it that way. So there's an interesting paradox here, is that we are using retrospective to bring change so that we can improve, but we don't look if we should change retrospective. What about you? So, yeah, for those of you who thought you would have 40, 45 minutes just listening to me and doing nothing, I'm really sorry to break your dreams right now. I will ask you during that presentation a couple of times to find a partner or a small group and discuss a couple of questions. It's going to be very quick because I'm going to give you only 1 minute each time. At the end of that minute, I'm going to raise my hand. When you see my hand raised, please stop discussing, stop what you're doing, and raise your hand in return. So the first thing I want you to discuss in small group or in pairs is what are you currently doing to promote continuous improvement, and only things which are not retrospective. 1 minute starts now.
Putting in place a deployment pipeline so that when we make changes, a series of incremental improvements planned for the pipeline to get us to where I currently see
Any?
I mean, I'd just have lots of work to do usually involving shotgun.
Thank you. So I had just one small precision that I should have done at the beginning. The whole talk, when I'm talking about continuous improvement, everything I'm saying is valid for team and crew or personal. I'm not making any distinction between the two. I'm just bundling that into continuous improvement. So the first thing I thought around this idea of retrospective, the first thing that bothered me is that they were separate events. It's a collection of separate events. Each retrospective, we are going back to square one and redoing the same thing. And I thought, can't we find some way to kind of unify them, to make them a little bit more motivating so that there is something behind them more than just going in that meeting. So I looked into the work of Daniel Pink. How many of you have heard about Daniel Pink before? One. Okay. So if you've never heard of Daniel Pink, please Google Daniel Pink on Google. It's the most watched TED Talk ever. His book, Drive, is basically a collection of scientific research which speaks about motivation, how human beings and by what human beings are motivated. The main takeaway from that book is that intrinsic motivator, or what he called extrinsic motivator, which means things external to you, money, reward, recognition, badges, and so on, actually play a very little role in motivation. What play a really important role is what he called intrinsic motivator, of which there are mainly three: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. The one that interests me today is especially mastery. Why? Because his definition is actually very close to this Kaizen or continuous improvement we're talking about. He says mastery is actually striving, wanting to get better at something that matters. The also important bit is this something that matters. There is this notion that mastery or continuous improvement needs a goal, need to kind of have some kind of target. And he delved deeper into that by quoting the work of Professor Carol Dweck. So for those who know me, Professor Carol Dweck, you know her very well, even though you might not know how. She's the one who has done all the research around the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. And what she says about mastery is that mastery needs a goal, continuous improvement needs a goal, but you need to be very careful what kind of goal, especially distinguish between what she calls learning goal versus performance goal. Performance goals will promote a fixed mindset, while learning goals will actually promote this growth mindset. To try to show you the difference, let me tell you a small story. I recently started to go back to the gym, as you can all see. And I knew that I would not manage on my own. I needed someone to kick my ass. So I decided to take a coach, and first meeting with her, she tried to set goals with me. And the conversation went like that. It's like, so why do you want to come back to the gym? I want to be healthy. So, that's not specific enough. Tell me, what's the problem? I don't know, I just have a bad posture, I start to get old. I just want to be healthy. Sometimes I have pain in the back. Pain in the back, that's specific. How much from 0 to 10? And it went on and on and on. What she was trying to do with me is to set SMART goal. Specific, measurable, attainable, etc. The problem with that is that I have this SMART goal of the gym, but I have no idea what it is. My coach, she knows. I don't know, and I don't care. Because that is not motivating me. What you want And that is typically a performance goal, very specific. Well, what damping tells us is that mastery is actually never attainable. Mastery is the principle of aiming for something, wanting something that you know you will never get. You want to be the best at something, but you know you will never get there. That's the principle of continuous improvement. That's the principle of Kaizen. Trying it, you can always be better, so you will never get to a point where you're there. So what you want is actually to set goals which are really bold, which are motivating, which are uplifting, something positive, not reducing pain. You want something which is really driven by your dreams. In other words, you want dumb goals. I wish I had created this idea of dumb goals. That's not from me. It's a guy called Brandon Burchard, I think, who had that idea. But the principle is there, that this is much better, and this is something to aim for, not something you know you will accomplish. So this is so important that with that, I started to try to set dumb goals with some of the teams I'm coaching. Here's one. You'll see I'm in some of the things, some of you will recognize some of the things you did, by the way. This is also something very visual and based on metaphor. So that idea here is you have this lighthouse, which is really a kind of guiding light, which has both the idea of really visibility, sense of direction, and people working together to get there. More than a goal, I also tend to call that a dumb vision. It's basically what kind of team you want to be. What's your aspiration? What's the thing that unites you around that? Another example with drawings. With here an idea, if I remember correctly, there was the idea of eliminating waste, of quality, of really succeeding and having results together at that team. Also the idea of collaboration. Again, there's nothing specific, there's nothing measurable. It's just some vision, some dumb vision uniting us to the things we want to reach. So what about you? So right now I will ask you actually to not discuss. I'll give you 1 minute of pure self-reflection. I don't want to hear anything. And I want to ask you, what is your personal, this time, not for your crew, but your personal dumb goal? What's your dumb vision? What do you want for yourself in the future? 1 minute now. If you find something good, write it down. Cool. So now I had this concept of dumb vision. We still needed a way to get there, which is not retrospective. So the first framework that I looked at is this. It's called the Toyota Kata or Improvement Kata. It's a very simple framework with 4 steps, which just say the first thing you need to do is to find a direction or a challenge. Dumb goals, we have that, fits well. The second step is to really define where are we right now. What's the current condition? A third step then is to establish the next target condition. This is the thing I don't really like because it seems to be a lot like a SMART goal, but it's basically trying to break down this vision into what's the next bit we want to achieve. And then fourth, we just do, those experiments. We introduce this change to try to get there. So I went with that with some teams I was coaching, being again something very visual, an improvement board. At the top you will see the dumb goal, or the dumb vision. In the middle, the effective planning was the next step to achieve, and you don't see it there because I took a back picture, but at the bottom there was also the starting point, the current condition. And we tried that. One thing I haven't mentioned is that this Toyota Kata comes, or improvement Kata, comes with a set of coaching questions. It's basically a set of questions to go through each day to actually help navigate those 4 steps, navigate this process. When I saw that, I was like, coaching question? I'm an agile coach. I don't need coaching question. I know coaching. I don't need that. This is way too strict and way too formal. I don't need that. So I went without them, because I knew better. And surprisingly, I failed. But I failed big time. At the beginning, when using those boards, we were standing in front of those boards. Some of the people here I see nodding will tell you. We were looking at those boards and we had absolutely no idea what to do with them and how to navigate them. And me neither. So it didn't work at all. What was happening here is I was victim of something, a strange effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And that, I have a bad news for you, is that you're actually all affected by it. Why? It's because it's a cognitive bias. It's actually built in your brain. That's just the way your brain works. So this Dunning-Kruger effect is actually, this is scientific research, quite documented scientific research. And what it says is that if you try to plot your competence in something on one axis and your confidence in that skill in another axis, all the time the plot will look something like that. So at the beginning, when you're not really competent, actually extremely confident, it's called Mont Stupid. And I've been at the top of Mont Stupid multiple times. When you start to gain competence, you descend in what they call this valley of despair. So you're gaining competence and your confidence is dropping. And really long after, when you really start to become an expert, you go back on this slope of enlightenment where your confidence and your competence rise together. What this says is that actually, most often than you want to think, you're actually not skilled enough to know that you're doing something wrong. So that's going to be a major problem because our retrospective is a self-reflection. We're doing a self-reflection, but we're not competent enough for that self-reflection to tell us that we're wrong. So it's not going to do anything. That's going to be a major problem in our continuous improvement. So how do we fight that? Well, Daniel Kahneman, the leading, what I would qualify him as the leading world expert on cognitive bias, would tell you there's only one way, is to bring an external view. That external view, one way to have it is through numbers, data, metrics, measurement. And that's what I did. So with the team I'm coaching right now, I'm trying to generate more data to know if where I'm going is the right path. And one question or one thing I do is I have a survey. One of the questions in that survey is how much impact did the coaching engagement have on your team? Trying to get that external view from the team themselves on is what I'm doing having an impact. The first time I did this, or one of the time I did this, I got the score like that. What do you think I did with that? Come on. Come on.
Try to find out why it wasn't a 5.
Really? No.
Everybody else was wrong, and they got the wrong score.
No. I went to brag to my boss. I went to say, see, boss, I nailed it. This is perfect. I know how to do coaching. Here it's there, right in front of you. That's I'm getting there. I'll introduce that in 2 seconds. It's actually team 42 number. That's why Ashik is. So, when my boss saw that and when I told him, look, it's amazing, his reaction was like, well, this data is really bad. It's like, what? And he was like, yeah, you're a coach. I'm expecting you to coach the team. If you're having an impact so strong, so fast, there's a problem. You're potentially creating a dependency towards yourself. And then when you exit the team, some of the things will go down. Basically, he was telling me that what he was expecting is a curve way more like that. So the main point of the story is there is two completely valid story and interpretation. Ashik gave even a third one, to the exact same piece of data. And all those interpretation means something completely different. What I want to show you with that is that it's all summarized into this quote of Taichi Ono. Taichi Ono, for those who don't know, he's he was an engineer at Toyota. Everything I say in general comes from Toyota. And he's one of the father of this thing called lean, that you must have heard about, I hope. So what he says is that people who can't understand numbers are useless. Fact, if you don't have numbers, if you don't have measurement, you cannot improve, period. Second thing, the Gemba where numbers are not visible is also bad. So Gemba in Lean is the place where value is created. So for you as software teams, it's where you do your work. That's the Gemba. What he's saying with that is that if you measure something, if it's hidden in a Jira or somewhere, it's useless. If you measure, if you have measurement, they need to be in front of you constantly, else you will never use them. But the most interesting thing is the end of the quote where he says, however, people who only look at the numbers are the worst of all. You need numbers, you need data, but you cannot rely only on numbers and data. Because depending on the interpretation, it means different things. And the really important thing is that why you have metrics and why you have measurement, it's not to prove yourself right, it's actually to prove yourself wrong. Data and measure are there to question what you're doing, to help you question, to fight your biases. They are there to show you when you're doing something wrong. You should not use metrics to feel good about yourself and to show that you're right, because this in general never helps. Few tips on how to gather more data if you don't know how to get more. Experimenting. We said that an experiment is a change to improve, but an experiment could also be a change with no mean to improve, but just to generate more data. Let's try this, see the data we are gathering to do something else after. Another way to get that external view of this data is to ask for external feedback. Take someone which is not in your team to come in your team for a day or two and tell you what they see. Go to another team and see. Get someone external who can look at what you're doing. Same individually, get someone to comment on what you're doing. To get that more constantly, get a coach, get a mentor, get someone who will be able to observe you for a long time and feeds observation and data to you. Another thing Taichi Ono, him again, speaks about is the concept of Kizuki. Kizuki means awareness in Japanese, and what Taichi Ono was very famous for is that he was drawing a chalk circle on the factory floor, asking mainly manager and senior engineer to stand in the circle for 4 hours without moving, with just one goal: observe. Look at what's going on. There's not many, how many managers we have here? Only Dave? Managers. It's only Dave. Where are they? This is the main. I wanted to pick on manager, Dave, so now I'm only picking. So tell your manager, this is the main thing a manager should be doing. It's observing and feeding data. That's their role. Half it. But you can also do it, try to do it yourself. Extract yourself from your team. Just observe what's going on and feed those observations back to the team. So, back to you. Data and observation are key. What are you going to do about it? Now you can talk, find again small groups, 1 minute, start. Cool. So after that, I still didn't had the framework to go to this dumb goal, and I was not really keen on trying again the Toyota Kata. So don't misunderstand me. I think it's a fantastic tool. Go try it. But me, I'm a bit nervous now around it. So I stumbled on that, which, if I remember correctly, is something Ivan shared on the QA channel like years ago, but he probably doesn't remember it. On the facilitation cup, yes. The idea, so this popcorn flow is a very simple idea. It's basically saying it's creating a board, again an improvement board with 7 columns. First column, problem and observation. Yay! We just spoke about observation, so again it fits. Putting down all your observation. From those observations, trying to derive options. So the concept about option is not listing only one, but trying to find several options. Refining them into possible experiment. Really the difference between option and possible experiment is option is still a bit vague, while possible experiment is quite defined. Then committed ongoing review is basically to do, doing, done. And the next is, now that we've done this experiment, what do we do next? How do we move further? And that's how it looked like in reality. With that team, what we did is we had swim lane where we grouped some of the theme together. That's just the way we decided to do it. Doesn't have to be like that. For me, there is 2 major concepts in this popcorn flow which are really important. The first one is this idea of diverging and converging, which comes from the options and possible experiment. So what we tend to do in retrospective is we have action, or we have a problem, and we try to find one action to solve that, and we limit ourselves to one action. We don't try to expand our horizon and to look at, is there other way we can solve those problems. The diverging part is in general missing. We go directly to one solution, we focus on it, and we don't extract ourselves. While for many problems, there is multiple solutions, multiple things we could do. So this popcorn flow is really trying to force us to go in that diverging mode. What I found out is that to get better in that diverging mode, you in general need to change a bit the way you're doing it. For example, by changing the medium of communication and introducing Legos to communicate ideas and generate even more ideas. The cool thing with that is that when you're trying to express an idea in Lego, the others have to describe your ideas, which in general expand the divergence even more, because people will describe things in a way that you don't even think about. The other thing I tend to do a lot is to send people on walk. It's just you're thinking more when you're outside of the building and when you are walking. So I tend to say, okay, you have 15 minutes, come back with 2 or 3 options. I call that, for the facilitation cup, I call that lazy facilitation. Because for 20 minutes I can just rest. I'm back to you again. I gave you a few ideas on how to really force or really create an arena to have that divergent thinking. Can you find other ideas? How can you get more often in that divergent mode? Same drill, 1 minute, talk as much with as many people as you want. Go. The second really interesting concept, or really powerful concept from the popcorn flow, is the review. The review actually comes with a set of questions. Oh, I've seen that before. And surprisingly, those questions are exactly the same as the question I discarded from the improvement kata. But really, word by word, they are the same. Those 4 questions, so in the concept of review, you spend some time doing an experiment. Then you go through those questions of what did you do? What was this experiment about? Just to remind ourselves what we did. What were we expecting? So if we did an experiment, we had some expectation, we thought something would improve. What was that? Then what actually happened? You're actually comparing what happened to what you were expected. This is something that is missing from most retrospective. We have a list of action. We go into the next retrospective. Have we done it? Yeah, cool, tick. But we're not asking ourselves, did it actually do what we thought it would do? We're just saying, well, we've done it, cool. But if what actually happened is not what you were expected, you're not done. You're not finished. You have tried something that didn't work, and you need to iterate and try something new. And that's what the 4th question is doing, by asking yourself, okay, if there is a difference or not between expected and actual, what have you learned? The power of that question is that it will also automatically feed back in the rest of the popcorn board, because it will, most of the time, what you will learn will feed into a new observation. We did that, this happened, there is something here. Oh, new observation which is feeding back. It might actually help trigger new divergent thinking with options. What we learn is maybe we should try that. Up, new option. And it's auto-feeding itself, which helps you to iterate. So that is, I found, very powerful, and I always found a bit strange asking those questions because it feels very scripted. There's not one time where I've asked them where we didn't get anything or where we didn't get something out of it. So really use them. All what I described here from the popcorn flow seems really similar to what Esther Derby and Diana Larson are telling us of how a proper retrospective should be constructed. Gathering data, we talked about that with the observation. Generating insights, that's the diverging mode of the options. Deciding what to do, that's the experiment will decide to do. Closing could actually be also part of the review. So what's different? The main thing that I thought was different is that when we're using the popcorn flow, and in general we're still using that with some kind of meeting, but can still call them retrospective, but then those meetings were not covering all of that. We would in general focus in one of those areas. Not enough options, the retro will just focus on generating more insight. Not enough observation, we'll just take the time to put more observation. We have lots of options, but we don't know what to decide, then we'll focus only in deciding what to do. And now the whole retrospective has the same construction, but it's spanning a longer period of time. We would also, because it's on the board, ad hoc have discussion and add things on top of it. And now you have a retrospective, which is just continuous. This is not a new idea. This is something that Linda Rising already talked about. Linda, let me borrow the first slide of her talk. If you've never heard about continuous retrospective and Linda Rising, Just Google that on YouTube. The video is there. It's an amazing talk. And it's very similar, or quite similar, to some of the things I already told you here. What Linda also speaks about in her latest book, More Fearless Change, she has a pattern that she calls time for improvement. And in that pattern, which is really the retrospective, she reinforced that the retrospective as a self-reflection will never be enough. You cannot improve with self-reflection alone. You need that external view, you need those coaches and mentor, you need those data to feed into the self-reflection. Back to this idea of time, one last bit that I found was quite interesting is that if I'm roughly optimistic and say that we are in general spending, let's say, 1 hour every week for a retrospective, that's the amount of time you spend improving during your week. And that will nowhere be enough. Never, ever. That's way too little. 2 hours every 2 weeks, 1 hour every week. You can put it the way you want, that's never going to work. It's just not enough.
And we only do 1 hour every 2 weeks for retros.
You need to combine that with some other stuff. That doesn't mean it's not a good start, it's better than nothing. And that doesn't mean all this time you need to just increase meeting time. Meeting is not the solution to everything. But there need to be some other arena to focus on that somehow. I'll give you a couple of ideas. This is something we use especially in the dojo, which is having a bell. The end-on bell is a concept that comes, again, Toyota. End-on cord, where in the factory there was a cord where employees could pull the cord to stop the production line and reflect. Same principle, the idea was to have a bell, and instead of waiting for a retrospective to speak about something, just ring the bell, everyone stop whatever they're doing, and immediate retrospective or immediate discussion to fix whatever is happening. The other concept I think we need to develop is to develop more routine and habits around it. If you look at what's a retrospective, it's basically just a habit. I told you at the beginning that habits were there was this negative things from habits that they prevent us to change. We can also turn it into a positive by creating habits to help us change. That's what a retrospective, it's a habit of stopping every 2 weeks. So the thing I'm suggesting is we just need to create more habits. The things I tried was to extend stand-up. I'm looking at 2 people in particular and telling them that this never worked. So I don't think this was ever a good idea, but it is an idea. And the concept of what we were doing is there was one stand-up to look at the normal Kanban board and another stand-up to look at the improvement board. In practice, I don't think it works, but you can try, and maybe there's something different that I haven't tried before. Coffee walk, so this is an interesting story. One of the team here, they came to me one day and they said, well, you know, your idea of extending stand-up, that's bullshit. What we're going to do is we're going to take a picture of the board on Monday and Wednesday. We're going to go to Gala to have coffee and we're going to discuss it there for 40 to 50 minutes. I was like, okay. Clearly those guys have done way more divergent thinking than I ever did. My only hope is that I think they had a good coach. I'm not sure. But quite powerful, I found. Another team I'm working with those days, what they do is they have a rule that whoever can call up something called a catch-up to talk about the board and look at what's there. So there's no regular habit, it's just the rule of saying anyone can say, now I would like everyone to look at the board and see what's happening. It's already working quite well, I think. There's probably more ideas, which is what I will ask you to do right now. So same thing important is when I tell you about habits, what I'm looking for is really not habits for you to improve, it's habits to spend more time looking at improvement. Really specific. It's how to create routines or habit that will force you to spend more time looking at improvement board or thinking about continuous improvement in general. And again, talk 1 minute now. So, to start to wrap up a bit, the main, for me, from all what I said, the main component of this continuous improvement thing. First thing, find your drive, find your dumb goal, something that is motivating, something that that guides you. Second, collect data and observation, feedback, things which are external view, things which are coming outside of your team or outside of yourself, your self-reflection. Second, divergent thinking. Really, before you commit to any experiment, before you commit to anything, make sure you spend enough time looking at different ways to see the problem and different solutions, different options. Then, of course, experiment. These bits will never go away. Doing that small change that will give you some improvement. The review, so again, taking the time to really see did our experiment achieve what it wanted to achieve, or do we need to do something new? And dedicate more time, find ways to create more habits to drive all of that, all the rest. Which brings me to my latest experiment. It's a new type of board, improvement board. I like the popcorn board and I really encourage you to use it, but some part of it I would like to simplify because I think it's a bit too much, and I'm also missing the goal, the dumb goal, and the habit thing. So this is how I think what I would like to try as a board, or actually maybe something like that, because I think maybe the option part should actually stay. Even when you are experimenting, that all the options you discussed before, that we can still look at it. And roughly it looks like that. And just to conclude, I'm also trying to use those kind of things on myself. So my habits is I tend to take time each evening to reflect a bit on what happened during the day and see if I have more observation. My main observation right now is that even though with all what I told you, I still think that I don't know nearly enough about continuous improvement. And I try to experiment a lot, but it's just me experimenting with that, and I cannot experiment like I'm seeing roughly 1 or 2 teams per 4 or 6 or 5 months. That's not nearly enough data as I would like to collect. So my latest experiment is to talk about all this. You might have heard about that. Hoping that you will take some of that, some of those experiments, be it the popcorn board, the Toyota Kata, or any of the concept I showed you, that you will run your own experiment, something different than the things I did, and that you will tell me about it, so that I can have more data and to drive my own goal, which is to really make sure every team and individual in that company continuously learn and grow. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah, I think it's already online. I'll share the link. More questions?
I kind of got a question. So, I believe continuous improvement is important as an individual outside of work, and also improving in the work environment, because that calls for a different type of improvement. And sometimes we don't get the opportunities to create more time for improvement in relation to the work and the value we have to deliver. Doing small things like observations, experiments, and review is important, but that seems, in this case, it's a very collective improvement. But generally, as individuals in the working environment, we have to improve our technical skills or learn something new. And a lot of people prefer to do that individually than with the team.
Yeah.
How do you convince people that you need that time to actually improve, and you're going to be spending a day or half a day, whatever, learning that thing on your own? And it's not that you're not doing work, but your improvement is contributing to the well-being of the organization.
Yeah. So first thing I want to say is that this kind of mod, like, maybe not, if I go back to this, I try to use the exact same framework when I'm coaching people one-on-one, but that's something I'm just starting right now. And the way I see it is the main thing we are missing is this difference between dumb and smart goal. For me, your delivery goal, your event line should be smart goals. Very defined, very measurable, very attainable. Now, we are trying sometimes to look at a personal goal as smart goals, which is a subset of that. That for me is where the problem lies. It should still be a dumb goal. What's your drive? What do you want to do? And then the observation, or the option especially, becomes the option in terms of with what's motivating you. In those delivery things, there are options and opportunities for you to drive that at the same time as driving your own personal improvement. But in general, they are hidden, and we don't spend enough time reflecting on where are those options. For me, this connection is missing. Again, you will spend time on personal improvement and all of that if you see that your personal motivation, first if you understand it. I think part of the dumb goal is that very often we don't understand ourselves what's really motivating us. So having this self-awareness and then being able to connect it to what the organization is trying to achieve should help drive that. Maybe I'm painting a too optimistic vision of that, but that's the way I tend to see it. Does that answer your question? Partially. Because you won't force people to spend time on that if they don't see their own self-interest, and trying to push too much only on the company interest, from my opinion, is never going to work.
I've noticed that if I am intrinsically motivated by whatever's happening in my life, I will spend more time outside work or whatever, investing time in learning about this thing, because I have that intrinsic motivation of achieving a specific goal of some sort.
Yep.
But when I find myself outside the work environment, not feeding off motivation for learning, I then tend to step back and question, okay, what can I change to create that intrinsic motivation again, or what's missing from the equation?
But that, from what you're describing, you're trying to understand better what's your dumb goal. What motivates you? Why, like, work is one part of your life, and then there is the things you're doing outside. But your dumb goal, these things, what motivates you to do this? Why are you a software developer and you're not an architect? Why you're not a UX designer? There is a reason. There might be a fair bit of luck and so on, but there is something. And that's something for me is understanding that better. If you understand it better and connect it to everything which is happening, will create that intrinsic motivation. Plus adding again the autonomy and the purpose. Here I'm speaking only on the mastery part. Will help you stay motivated in doing all those things.
That makes sense.
Can you give a couple more examples around the data that you might track, that you've seen that are useful to see track if there is a tendency towards continuous improvement, and if you are actually more successful as you go?
That's the thing which is tricky, is really the data can be anything. So you can track your cycle time, you can try but I remember the time where in the partner nation, a lot of teams were measuring their happiness by having every week rating the happiness from 1 to 5 or something like that. That's already data. Anything that you would need a whole new talk to speak about all the data you can track. The important thing is really to try to understand what story the data tell. Because any data can be, any metric can be interpreted both ways. Amount of bugs are decreasing, well, you're getting sloppy and you're not spending enough time looking at the bugs. That's not a good sign. Engagement score is getting higher, well, that's because we are not hiring people who are critical. I can take any piece of data and turn it upside down with another story. So the main thing also with that is that I showed you only one piece of data, but when I'm looking, the survey I'm giving to teams, there is many different factors, and I'm trying to see, here's my hypothesis, my story, does all the data match that story? If there's one piece of data that doesn't match the story, it means the story is wrong. But I can never say if the story is right. It's back to this. You use data to disprove what you think, but you can never prove it. It's the same thing as it's the scientific method. A scientific theory is valid because it has not been disproven. We've never proven any scientific theory. We just haven't disproven them. Same thing. So for your continuous improvement, I believe that you actually cannot know if you're really improving. The only thing you can know is if you're not improving. I know it sounds strange and it's putting it upside down, but I think that's the only thing you can do. So collect as much data as you can. Any other question? No? Good.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thanks Aurelien. So next week we have a brown bag done by...
Oh, maybe a bit of postpone.
Oh, Richard!